CoMotion's own John Rossant, who perhaps will talk a bit about an exciting new hydrogen initiative that he is also leading in Monaco, but he'll be joined on stage by Air Products' Eric Guterman. So John and Eric, the floor is yours.
It's nice to take off that mask.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
Well, it's really great to have you, Eric, because and Eric Guter is the vice president of hydrogen mobility.
That's correct.
At Air Products, which is one of the world's great industrial gas companies. And I'll bet very few people know what an industrial gas company is, but that's okay. They're a very vital part of the industrial economy everywhere. And what's been interesting the last 3 days is that hydrogen has sort of cropped up as a subject throughout, whether it's for propulsion systems and aerial mobility, and we have our prototypes, eVTOLs here, whether it's around heavy duty trucking, etc. But it seems that hydrogen's time has come after many years. And I think you've been with Air Products involved with hydrogen for over 20 years.
That's correct.
So do you kind of wake up in the morning thinking, yes, finally?
Well, absolutely. It's been exciting for me because I've actually, as you point out, been involved in hydrogen for my entire career. So It's always been here, but now people are starting to understand where it's going to play a role in transportation and decarbonized transportation. And so we know that that climate change is real. It's here and it's created by humans. And the only way for us to reverse the effects is for humans to step in. And in order to do that, we need hydrogen to be a part of that solution. We know that we can't electrify everything. And so hydrogen will play a complementary role in the energy transition.
Yeah. But sometimes here in California, we are so electric forward in this state more than anywhere else in the union, obviously. I mean, there are more Teslas on the road here than anywhere else, etc. Sometimes, you talk to people who are in the EV space, you don't want to hear about hydrogen. It's sort of the enemy somehow. We have to go all electric. And I always say, no, it's not either or, it's obviously and. And people don't get that.
Yeah, it's really hard for people to wrap their head around. Hydrogen's a different concept, but it's a one-for-one drop-in replacement fuel. It replicates the transportation fuel experience. And academics and experts in this space know we can't electrify everything. UC Irvine, Dr. Jack Brower, one of my good friends, has done a lot of research with he and his team around this. And we know we simply just can't electrify everything, because in order to get to zero carbon power, we're going to have to scale up tremendously. And certainly that can help electrify segments of transportation, including light duty automotive and light industry. But hydrogen has that distinct role play primarily really in heavy duty applications because of the weight of the battery, the range requirements, the refueling, the long range, and cold weather climates. I know we don't have that here in most places, but that is a factor in all this. So in order to decarbonize transit and heavy duty trucking, ports, rail, shipping, that's where hydrogen will have a distinct role to play. It certainly can be applicable to light duty automotive, and we do that here in a major way in California today, and we're going to ramp that up over time as well, because it has a role to play there as well, alongside BEVs to help us decarbonize transportation.
Well, I mean, one of the issues, though, certainly recently has been, Shakespeare used to say, hydrogen everywhere, and not a drop. Oh no, that was water, I think. Yeah. But if you're an owner of a Mirai, a Toyota Mirai, which is a wonderful car, I've driven one. It's just an awesome piece of engineering. It's a hydrogen fuel cell car, as many of you know. There's been a penury of hydrogen. I mean, I have friends who have Mirais, and they can't get a fill up, and that's not cool. So so we obviously need more infrastructure. So how do we solve for that? And is Air Products going to play a role in that?
Absolutely. Without question, we have to build up that infrastructure, and we have to do that quickly. But more importantly, we have to build up the production sources. And so we have announced about $15 billion of new investment in hydrogen all around the globe.
15 billion.
15 billion with a B.
15 million. That's
Sorry, B with a B.
Oh, with a B. Okay, billion. Okay, now you're talking. Okay.
Yeah, $15 billion of new investment in clean hydrogen production assets all around the globe. Along with that, we're building out transportation infrastructure, because really what we've been doing here is been at very small scale. I would call it demonstration pilot scale in light duty automotive. We have to scale up that infrastructure tremendously. Not only do we need larger infrastructure, we need a lot more of it. And we're very focused on developing that infrastructure wherever it's needed throughout. California certainly is a leader in climate change and decarbonizing transportation. We're very focused on that here and in other parts around the globe. I lead our team globally, and we have teams all around the world proliferating hydrogen for mobility.
Okay, but Eric, do we, for example, here in California, or in maybe more generally the United States, do we have the right set of incentives, the right kind of regulatory framework that incentivizes people to invest in the necessary kind of infrastructure, the pipelines, et cetera?
That's a great question. Certainly, California has been on the forefront of legislation with incentives to decarbonize, as well as mandates for adoption. And so they've really been incredibly focused. And I point to California when I talk to other jurisdictions around the globe, that this is a model that you could replicate. It's technology agnostic in policy. So if you want to use a BEV, that's great. If you want to use hydrogen, that's great. But we're going to get to zero emissions, which is the most important thing. And they incentivize that transportation and encouraging all segments of mobility to do that and do that quickly.
Right. One of the kind of themes that's cropped up over the last 3 days has actually been maritime mobility. We have a huge crisis right offshore of the ports of LA and Long Beach, where these sort of tankers and container ships are piled up, et cetera. They can't offload. It's creating huge sort of near-term pollution impact, et cetera. And one of the big new challenges going forward is going to be decarbonizing maritime transportation. It's true that it only represents 3 or 4% of total carbon emissions globally, but that's 3 or 4%. And if you're a port city, it's much more than that.
That's right.
It has a really big impact, and you add on bunker fuel and leaks and all that crap, et cetera. So hydrogen has to play a role here. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. So we certainly see hydrogen having a role, but in shipping, it's probably going to be ammonia, which is a very efficient energy carrier for hydrogen. And so I just got back from COP26 over in Glasgow. I was really encouraged because coming out of that was the Clydebank Declaration.
Very, very important. Listen.
Where countries around the globe have agreed to work towards decarbonizing shipping routes around the globe. And the really exciting thing about that is ammonia is already transported all around the globe today in ships. And in fact, one of the projects that we talked about a minute ago is that Air Products is making a lot of green hydrogen in Saudi Arabia. And the way we're going to move that around the world is as ammonia. So conceptually, we can be moving that ammonia around the world in decarbonized ships, transferring that back into hydrogen wherever it's needed to decarbonize other segments of the transportation sector, and including ports. So it's a really exciting opportunity to decarbonize shipping, ports, and other segments of the mobility market all around the globe.
Right. I know, of course, when you say the word ammonia, I want to reach for my revolver. I mean, I don't really mean that, but we have the memory of what happened in Beirut with that big explosion. Ammonia is a very potentially dangerous substance. So no, I'm playing the devil's advocate. So in this scenario, you have hundreds of thousands of tons of green ammonia arriving in the port of LA or Long Beach and being stocked. I mean, how do you get over this sort of NIMBY factor about like, oh my God, we can't possibly have that?
So first off, the important distinction is what happened in Beirut was ammonium nitrate, not ammonia. And that's a big distinction. This is not explosive.
I'm not sure the man or woman in the street appreciates that.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. But around the globe, there are about 150 million tons of ammonia produced, moved all around the globe today. So we don't even realize this is happening, but it's primarily moved around for agricultural use. In fact, California imports a lot of ammonia into the port of Stockton, as an example. And in the US, we have about 3,600 miles of ammonia pipeline taking ammonia from the US Gulf Coast up to the Midwest for our agricultural industry.
Right.
So this is already done in a major and significant way, and it's done safely. And most people don't know about that. And it's because it's done safely that they don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I wear this button on my lapels. Our company mantra, the first top line of that is safety, because nothing is more important to us than safety. It's part of our social license to operate in the jurisdictions we're doing business. It's part of our compact with our employees that when they come to work, they're going to go home in the same manner in which they came there. So we look at every project we undertake, including ammonia projects or hydrogen projects, with that eye to safety, because there's nothing more important than that, not profit, not sales. And so we undertake that, and we make the handling of transportation fuels safe.
Right. I mean, one of the kind of interesting things for me about hydrogen is the geopolitical implications of having a decentralized energy source. Because traditionally with hydrocarbons, you have sort of massive concentration of hydrocarbons in the Persian Gulf, in West Africa a little bit, was here in California at one point, in Texas, and then everywhere else like nothing. So we rely on OPEC, et cetera, traditionally. So that's being sort of broken. With hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, you need wind and sun, and you have green electricity, which then can produce unlimited green hydrogen. So you can produce that almost anywhere. So it can really change some of the geopolitical dynamics in the world, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, but we're going to remake that with all kinds of interesting hydrogen centers. What's really important when you're making green hydrogen is about the availability of those resources that you talk about. Right. And there are key geographies all around the world where we have the highest capacity factors for solar and wind to generate that decarbonized hydrogen. That's why we selected Saudi Arabia for our NEOM project, because they have world-class renewable power resources. So,
yeah, and that's one I know very well, yes, since I've been an advisor on NEOM for the last 3.5 years. And NEOM, for those of you who don't know, is a new city that's being built in the northwest quadrant of Saudi Arabia. It's about 50 kilometers south of the Israeli border, which is a fact of significance, I think. It's along the Red Sea. And what's very significant about this geography, it's very far from the oil fields of the Persian Gulf. What it has is particularly strong solar radiation during the day. Actually, you don't have the fog of the Persian Gulf. It's very, very pure solar radiation. And at night along the Red Sea, you have very high winds. So it's this perfect combination to produce unlimited amounts of renewable electricity. I think Western Australia has a similar topographical footprint, maybe a few other geographies. But the irony is that Saudi Arabia, which had been the main power in OPEC and oil, is now positioning itself as one of the main powers in green hydrogen, because they intend to export that into the Mediterranean.
That's absolutely correct.
And excuse me. And what's been interesting is it's one of the biggest projects of Air Products, and it's probably one of the world's biggest green hydrogen projects.
That's right. Collectively, we're a 1/3 investor in a joint venture at the production asset. That's a $5 billion production asset to create the world's largest green hydrogen production center in the world. And then we've committed to another $2 billion of downstream infrastructure investment. So putting in the stations, the transport, the disassociation to respond to geographies like California who want to green up their transportation sector. We're going to do that. We're going to lead the way on that. We're really excited about that. It's one of our 3 announced growth platforms. One of the exciting things about that for me is our growth platforms are underpinning our sustainability ambitions and vice versa. And so that's a unique place to be. I don't think many people have the luxury of in their careers of being in that situation like I do. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah,
and so are our 20,000 employees around the globe.
One of the things though, and we've talked about this a lot sort of offline, is education. People don't know, I mean, hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, but it's one that people don't know a lot about. If you ask a man or woman in the street, what is a fuel cell? They would have absolutely no idea. And so there's an educational challenge, I think. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. People ask me what my biggest challenge is every day in the proliferation of hydrogen and mobility applications. I tell them always education, 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 because if you're a transit operator, if you're a trucker, you don't want to be wrapped up in trying to figure out, do I need a battery electric car? Do I need a hydrogen car? And so education is my biggest role. And so that's why I travel all around the globe to help educate people on where hydrogen can play a role and let them make the decision, because we're all aligned that we need to get to zero emissions. We know that BEV and fuel cell electric vehicle are complementary and will be both needed to get us to zero emissions.
Right. One of the other interesting things about California, apart from being very hydrogen forward, but within hydrogen, is that we look a lot at hydrogen in this dimension of mobility, the aviation.
Mm-hmm.
We have Zero Avia up in the Bay Area with Val Niftikov. Here, Universal Hydrogen with another Russian emigre, Paul Eremenko, that are looking at ways to a fuel cell in planes. And is that coming? And you notice, I think, in the mobility hub here, there's a marvelous electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft from Volocopter and Whisk. And it's been definitely a theme this year at CoMotion. And it will be a bigger theme next year, I can guarantee you. How will hydrogen play a role there? And where do you see that happening?
It's the same story, because as all the other heavy duty transport segments, because of the range requirements, the heavy duty applications, we think that hydrogen will have a distinct role to play there. We know that all of the major aviation entities are researching and developing technologies for hydrogen's application in aviation. And so we think we'll get there. But, we see hydrogen across all segments happening today. It happens in forklifts for material handling in warehouses. It happens in light duty automotive. It's happening in transit, where we have a station in Orange County at their transit depot there, where they're demonstrating 10 buses, and we provide the fuel in the station for that. It's moving into long haul trucking very quickly. In fact, Air Products has announced that we're decarbonizing our entire fleet of trucks across the globe. We have over 2,000, and we're adopting next year pilot trucks, hydrogen fuel cell, that will ultimately result in our fleet being 100% zero emission. So we'll be moving around clean hydrogen in zero emission trucks, which we think is really important to lead the way. And then all of these other segments of the heavy duty transportation, rail, shipping, and aviation is where we think hydrogen will have that role to play.
So when will, if I, take a long haul airliner, airplane from LAX to, let's say, Heathrow, and sometime in the future, when will that be hydrogen powered?
That's a great question. I'm going to defer to the experts working on that, but I know that
Come on, you must have an inkling of a.
We actively talk to those folks to help them demonstrate and test those technologies, but we know we need to get there because there's no other way to decarbonize.
Right. I will open up for a few questions. So think about some questions you might like to ask Eric Guder on hydrogen. What else can I ask you? I mean, I could talk for hours about this because it's one of my favorite subjects, actually. What about rail? Because I noticed that, of course, here right near in San Bernardino, there's a new, I think, a 9-mile test track that's going to be a hydrogen-driven train. Will that sort of thing be rolled out more extensively in the future, do you think?
We certainly think.
I mean, rail, is that a big
Absolutely. It's a huge market and opportunity. And we, through our conversations around the globe, we're talking to a lot of rail operators who are actively developing and progressing hydrogen for rail. There are demonstration projects underway. We, in fact, have fueled some rail applications in some key locations. And so we know that the folks are working on this. So we're here with the hydrogen and the fueling infrastructure to do this. And we want to be supportive of moving us along to that decarbonized economy.
Interesting. Good. Anybody have a question? Don't be shy. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking.
Well, the fact that you can talk about this endlessly means you have a standing invitation to come to my house anytime. My family gets very bored talking about this. So,
okay. What about, well, one thing we haven't really addressed is, and it is kind of a dirty little secret, is that hydrogen is a remarkably corrosive element. It's corrosive. It's a very small atom, so you need special tanks. Of course, liquid hydrogen is in that state when it's minus 200 and something, just very little bit above absolute zero. That's kind of problematic, isn't it?
Only if you don't handle it properly.
I knew you'd say that.
In our over 80 years of existence, we've been producing, distributing, moving hydrogen around for over 60 of those years. We got involved in hydrogen with NASA in 1957, if you can believe that, and we've been doing it ever since, primarily for industrial applications. But we take that safety focus that I talked about. We operate pipelines all around the globe. In fact, here in Los Angeles, we operate an over 30-mile hydrogen pipeline in Los Angeles that we could conceivably use in lots of mobility applications and leverage that infrastructure that's already in the ground. In the US Gulf Coast, we operate a over 700-mile pipeline that spans from the Houston Ship Channel all the way to New Orleans, moving massive quantities of industrial scale hydrogen all through that area for the refining sector primarily, but now we're advancing that into mobility to help it decarbonize.
Right. Going back to the idea that there was a kind of hydrocarbon economy, and we're moving out of that, thank God. But the thing about hydrocarbons is that there were the majors, the Seven Sisters, who basically controlled oil and gas. Shell, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, BP, etc. Total, I guess, little sister. This new world of post-hydrocarbon, it will be different players. I imagine Air Products will be a player. It could be Plug Power, one of your competitors. It could be, how is that going to work? Who is going to make the profits? Will it be a Shell, which is also investing in hydrogen, or a BP, which is quite hydrogen forward, or a Total? Or will there be Air Products hydrogen stations, or will you supply Shell stations? It's really unclear to me who's going to make money out of this.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that will be play an important role in the whole ecosystem to help provide hydrogen in the transportation sector and help that decarbonize. We certainly think we have a significant role to play given our history and our ability to manage this from production to distribution to dispensing. We're leaders in this space starting over 30 years ago to develop these safety standards and codes and fueling protocols to make sure that we could do this and do this safely. And we're just building on that very rapidly so that we have solutions for geographies like California and others that want to decarbonize now, to make sure that that infrastructure is in place. We can put that in place, we can manage that. But there will be a lot of people that are part of this. My job every day is to make sure that our company is in business for another 80 years. And so that's what I'm focused on.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Yes. Could we have a microphone? Is there a microphone there?
I have a question about
Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Claire Letman with Verde Exchange. Curious about different shades of blue hydrogen and how advances in carbon capture technology are sort of changing the carbon impact of blue hydrogen.
So I think the question is sort of blue versus green versus gray hydrogen.
Well, gray versus blue versus, 95% carbon capture versus 25.
Yeah, the whole carbon capture.
Okay, so apologize. This might be a little bit long-winded, but around the globe, predominantly we produce hydrogen as gray hydrogen. That is taking natural gas, removing the hydrogen from that methane molecule, and the carbon is released in the atmosphere as CO2. Now we know from information from the Union of Concerned Scientists that they have said even that converting transportation using gray hydrogen results in about a 30 to 50% emissions reduction right out of the gate. So we can convert transportation today and have a huge step change in improvement in emissions. Now, we're not satisfied with that. And so back in 2013, we developed retrofit technology to apply to our steam methane reformers and allow us to reduce the amount of CO2 from production assets by about 50%. We did that in conjunction with the Department of Energy, hugely successful project. We sequester about 1 million tons of CO2 annually and have been doing that since 2013. But we're not satisfied with that. And so we're taking that technology, expanding it to new processes, or I shouldn't say new, they've existed for a long time, but because CO2 is so important to remove from the atmosphere, we can get to very deep decarbonization, over 95% CO2 removal using natural gas as the feedstock. But we're not satisfied there, and that's why we're going to green hydrogen. And so the point is that we'll have solutions to meet every jurisdiction, geography, wherever they are on the energy transition, because that's what this is about. It's a transition. And so we're making sure that we have those solutions in place for everyone.
But there's still the percentage of overall hydrogen production in the world that is green is under 5%, right?
It's very small.
It's very small. And that will rise, I imagine.
It's going to rise tremendously.
Yeah.
And that's why we're bringing about this world scale project, because we're not trying to solve a very small regional problem. We're trying to solve a global problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and then, of course, there'll be mandates like the Japanese have that ammonia or hydrogen that's imported has to be a certain percentage of green hydrogen, right?
That's right.
And that will drive investment, et cetera.
Absolutely. Every geography and jurisdiction around the globe is looking at their natural resources, and they're looking at their ambitions to decarbonize and saying, okay, how do I do that in the most efficient, cost-effective manner that is good for my economy, but it lets me achieve my decarbonization goal. So everyone might be a little bit different, but the point is that we're all very focused on getting to decarbonized energy sources for transportation and heavy industry all around the world.
Right. The Australians have become very active with Mr. Forrest. How do you see that? That's a big competitor. Is it a down the line?
There are Australia, as you pointed out, is one of those exciting geographies where they also have some very world-class renewable power resources to generate green hydrogen. There are lots of others, North Africa and Chile. And so we anticipate there'll be many more projects. We're certainly not done investing in this space, and we're going to have a lot more announcements to come in the near, not too distant future.
Yeah, well, I'll be looking out for this, Eric. I want to thank you very much for taking your valuable time to spend with us to talk about this very important subject, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, John.